Good morning, everyone. Thomas Fleming here. I'm going to continue to come to this one spot right now. I am trying to plan a hike. Been waiting for the trails to dry out from all the rain that we had. There's still some puddles in some of these, and there's clay, and that can be slippery, so they've kept some of them closed. I think today they're going to open everything up. So anyhow, I'm going to go out and try one of the trails. They have different levels of trails for each individual. You don't have to go very far. You can just, I just walked down here from my campsite. I just walked on the road. I could have gone back to the back and gone on the trail. No rain means pollen. The trees are getting their leaves back. I've moved my antenna 4 times trying to see how to work around it. I've still got, even even if I find that it's partially blocked, I've still got better than the Wi-Fi that they provide here. And I just learned something out about Starlink. You can set up a second connection, which is good. So they took away the Ethernet capability, so you can't just plug another router in. There's a way to do it, but you've got to, you got to be a little tech savvy to do it. So the average person, you don't need to do it. But if you're going to do like I am, and you bring somebody else along and you want to share the Wi-Fi with them, like my son when he gets here, I had to figure out how to do that. So I just did. So he can use either my connection or he can use the guest one. I'm going to put him on the guest one initially and see how that works. Hear all the birds. If I'm quiet for a second, you can hear. We've got a mating pair of sparrows that have a permanent nest up in one of the eaves of the comfort station, the bathroom. And they're back. They're up there in the nest now. I don't know if there's little ones yet. I haven't seen them. They start off, you don't know they're there, and then pretty soon there's no denying that they're up there. The nest is, it's a pretty good sized nest. It's mud built up there, and it's been there for 3 years anyway. This is a time for renewal. We're coming up on Easter. Now we celebrate the other holidays like Christmas, but Christmas isn't Christ's birthday, it's just the time that we celebrate it. But Easter, we're pretty spot on for that. And last year, the Jewish calendar they have a leap month. We have a leap year, they have a leap month. Different calendar. So now we're pretty much in alignment coming up. Easter, I think, is the 9th. No. Yeah, it's the 9th. And I think Passover starts on the 5th. I have to look. I'll try to put it down below. Trying to remember. The problem I have with this phone is it doesn't multitask. If I have to pull over and pull up something else, another app, I have to stop the video. Anyhow, no big deal. I just put it down below. But Easter's right in the middle of Passover. I've got a Passover video coming up. I'm working on it. I'm not writing it. I just got to get all the scripture references. All the things that went on back then were because the Israelites didn't listen to God. They had a perfect arrangement, but they didn't listen to God. Joseph gets sold into slavery prior to Moses. He gets sold and then prison and then rescued and then prison again and then rescued again. He got elevated to the #1 position. Yeah, they were living in somebody else's land, but they were well taken care of. But over generations, they stopped following God, and when they stop following God, He allows things to progress against them. Remember, God never punishes us directly. If He punishes us, it's taking His hands off and letting us do it ourselves. That's the worst punishment God can give us. Let us do it ourselves. We weren't designed to do things by ourselves. We were designed to work with God on everything that we do, especially in a hostile world, especially with our sinful nature. I'm anxious to see how He's going to work this out when we get to heaven, when we don't have that. Hopefully our nature then will be to want to be with Him all the time. But if in our current state, people would wander away. But we've got the Passover time coming up. After a while, living with the king's blessing in these areas, pharaohs, if you will, eventually they get a pharaoh in there that's looking at the 1 million+ Jews and fearing there's more of them than there are of us. I'm worried about them. What are we going to do? He starts giving him jobs to do. Pretty soon they're all enslaved. And if you got somebody who's a slave, they really can't retaliate, which is what our one world government is trying to do. Enslave us so that we can't retaliate. They want to take our guns away so we can't retaliate. That's why we have an amendment in the Constitution for the right to bear arms. It's not so we can hunt. It's so we can fight against a tyrannical government. They knew what kind of a government they lived in when they were in England and other countries over there, and they wanted to protect themselves against it. So that's why the Constitution was amended. We got freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. Those are protections for us from a government out of control, and that's why they want to get rid of them. They're going to modify the Constitution slowly, or they're going to just throw it away, one or the other. They can't do it yet. They're not quite there, but they're getting close. The closer they get to that, the closer we are to getting out of here. And it may be that the only way that they're going to be able to do it is to wait for the rapture. They can fool non-Christians, but they can't fool Christians. We can see right through them. That's why we're the restrainer. We're keeping them from doing what they want to do. And Satan thinks he's far enough along, he's going to try to kill us off. And that's when we're going to get raptured. Revelation 12. But anyhow, getting back to our reason for the Passover. Pharaoh was a tough guy. He was in charge of the slaves of the Israelites. And if they got out of line, he'd throw more work at them, beat them down, wear them down. That's a trick. Dictators know that. If you're too tired to, when you get home from work, you're going to go sleep. You're not going to go plot. You know the story. They were making bricks. And they used to supply them, the Egyptians used to supply them with the materials. He started making them go out and get their own materials. Additional work. Moses is living happily in a different area. He had to run, remember, because he killed one of the Egyptians. He lost his status, but they still knew who he was when he came back. They knew he was one of them, essentially. He was born an Israelite, but he was raised an Egyptian. So he knew all their rules, and they knew who he was, and he was high up. That gave him access to the Pharaoh. They could have just killed him. But of course he had to do some demonstrations to show that God was with him. And of course he didn't want to talk. We see Charlton Heston doing his role in the Ten Commandments, and he seems to be quite capable of talking. But the Moses of that day didn't really want to talk, so he got Aaron, his brother, to talk for him. But eventually Moses had to go up and be the one there. Passover was because they wouldn't listen. The 10 things that went wrong, the rivers turning to blood, the frogs, the locusts, all were bad. But Pharaoh's heart was being hardened because he didn't have a connection to God. His gods, which they were many, his gods didn't help him. But his heart kept getting hardened. As Christians, we won't find that as a problem because the Spirit won't let us. But non-Christians can be. That's why when you're talking to them and you're trying to share the gospel, some people are just closed about it. Get out of here. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Don't open your mouth. Just leave. I don't want to hear it. I've gotten that so many times. I find ways to sneak it in, but it's not as easy as it used to be. But the plagues, just like the seals and the trumpets, they get progressively worse. The first one doesn't seem to be too bad. The first seal, the first horse rider, is coming in on a white horse. How can that be bad? The good guys wear white and the bad guys wear black. Standard Western. They're not going to know who he is. We do, but they won't. They're going to see this guy coming in, smooth talker, and he's going to bring peace. Without fighting, he's going to bring peace. Careful of gypsies bearing gifts. But the plagues get worse, and Pharaoh won't let his people go. First off, Moses just says, we just want to go out for a day or so and just worship God out in the desert. Then we want to go and we want to take our, belongings with us so they're not stolen. We want to take our animals with us. We want to go for a week or two. He keeps asking for more. And Pharaoh keeps denying. Pharaoh's about ready to really unleash into him when the angel comes down to them and tells them about put the blood of a lamb, a normal sacrifice like we're used to with the temple type things. It's got to be a good lamb. You kill it the proper way and you put the blood on the doorpost. I don't know what that meant other than it's a symbol of Christ. But physically, what did it mean? Was there maybe a mosquito or a gnat or something that would be contagious? That if you put the blood on there, it would stop at the door and not go in? God always uses nature. He doesn't have a magic wand. He doesn't need it. He knows the complete timeline and knows how to, work with the timeline. He doesn't have to have a magic wand. There is a reason why he did that. Symbolized, one, Christ, but also to prevent whatever was going to kill the people. Why the firstborn? Now the firstborn is the one that has the authority. He's going to be the one that's going to be replacing the father figure eventually. Christ is going to replace not God, but down here, he's taking over. He's the ruler in our universe. Satan's a ruler on earth. Limited ruler because he can only do what God lets him. But Jesus is coming up, growing up, learning all the rules, offers himself as a sacrifice, and becomes that lamb to protect the people. Only instead of covering the altar, covering our sins, he eliminated them by paying the price for them. As a sinful person, we're supposed to go to hell. And those that don't accept Christ are temporarily. Hell is only temporary. That's the good news for all these people. They get to escape hell and go to a lake of fire. So much better. Forever. You don't wish that on your enemy, really. That's why we're told to pray for our enemies. They can find Christ, the only way out. So anyhow, they put the blood on the doorpost. They go to bed that night. Pharaoh doesn't know that. They get a disease of some sort, probably. I'm guessing. This might not have happened overnight. I mean, obviously, the blood on the doorpost worked. But that, if you get a bug, if you get the big C, people were dying from that. They didn't die immediately. That might take a week or two or a month. So this might have been, some transition time. Time for Pharaoh to think. We're all given time to think. When God shakes us up and says, listen to me, you're not following what I'm telling you to do, he'll give you some time. The seventh seal, time. There was silence in heaven. God always gives people time to think about what's been going on. You're getting a chance to change your way. Sometimes you get more time than others, but depends on who we are and what the problem is. And if you won't sit down, God will make you sit down. Jonah wouldn't listen. He made him spend time in the belly of a whale. I'm sure at the very end he's going, God, get me out of here. He's still alive. Get me out of here and I'll do what you want me to do. Are you sure, Jonah? Yeah, this time I'll listen to you. And he did. And it worked for a little while. Nineveh was good for a little while, but they went right back to their ways again. We tend to do that. If we've got a bad habit, we tend to go back to that. But the Passover killed Pharaoh's firstborn, oldest. I'm sure in his grief he said, fine, go, get out of here, please, leave. But there's over 1 million people. We don't know how many, but because whenever it lists numbers in the Bible, there's 700,000 or there's 500,000, it's only listing the men. It's not listing the women and children. So there's always, at least double that. Anyhow, he lets them go. It takes them a little while to get moving. And they go around the households and they give them gold. The Egyptians are paying them to leave. That gold will be a problem for them later on. Nice big golden calf. Sometimes when they give you stuff, be careful. Don't store up treasures on earth, store up treasures in heaven. But anyhow, they take off. They're marching. They get to the river. By this time, Pharaoh has come out of his daze, his mourning of his son. and he orders his military to go after him, to kill him, not to bring him back necessarily. He didn't care at that point. Moses holds his staff in the air and parts the water. However that happened, they got across on dry land. And when they get completely across, he lowers his staff, and the water collapses on Pharaoh and his troops. We don't know exactly where that spot was. There's a lot of speculation, but we haven't actually found a place. We know it's not that long ago. You know, we argue about how old the earth is and whatever, but this is fairly modern history. And we know who the Pharaoh was, and we know, pretty much where everything was at, but we don't know where they crossed. They couldn't go all the way to the Mediterranean because there were people up there that wouldn't like them up there, and they didn't want to fight. So they tried to cut across and go around. And they got out in the desert, and that's where they made another mistake. But this is about Passover. This isn't specifically a video about Passover. I'm going to cover that in more detail. We're going to read some scriptures. This is just a general talk about it, of why they had it and what it represents. We all have to go through this. Now, as Christians, we've already survived this part of it, and we've made it to the promised land. But we're still here for a short while. We can look, prophecy is the hardest thing. Unless you're a prophet, you can't fully interpret it. It's like the dreams, the dreams that Joseph interpreted. They asked all their people, all their wise guys, and everybody else, and nobody could interpret it. And they went and sent for Joseph. And he could interpret the dream. You've got to have someone who's got that gift. And apparently nobody has the gift. We have so many versions of everything right now. Don't be dismayed by them. I tell people all the time, as long as we're in agreement on the gospel, the rest of it's academic. We can debate it, we can discuss it politely. But there are those out there that are in fringe groups, cults, that if you try to discuss it with them, they're ready to pull out their knives and swords and guns and bombs and just do whatever they have to shut you up, because they're right and they're not going to take anything else. I deal with them every once in a while. I give them a little bit of time just because God told me to. But after a while you realize there's no point in arguing with them. They're not at the point of accepting anything but what they've been brainwashed with. And that's what they've been. They've been brainwashed. Satan's got a hold of that cult, and they're close, but no cigar. There'll be ones that'll be surprised when they're still here after the rapture. Maybe by that time they're going to have enough of a foundation that they realize they better go back and look at the scriptures. All right, how we doing on time? Yeah, we're good. I think I can go ahead and wrap this up. We're just biding our time, doing our jobs. And our one job is to spread the gospel. Talk to everybody you can about it. If they're not interested, move on. If they are interested, talk to them. Share with them. Help them to get started if they don't know Christ at all. Maybe you're only planting seeds. That's okay. It's an important job. Doesn't have the glory. That makes it even more important. All right, till we meet in the clouds. The trees are starting to fill in. You used to be able to look back in there 100 yards. They're just starting to fill in. They haven't completely yet. You can still see back there a little ways, but it won't be long to where you won't be able to see 3 feet in. Pine trees have stayed green, but look at the other trees. The hardwoods are starting to leave up, so it's a beautiful place in here. Lots of trails. They have simple trails, they have complicated ones. Whatever your capability is. They have a little river trail here that just takes you along the river. It's very level for the most part. 2 or 3 bridges to go across, wooden ones. I haven't done a hiking video in a while because the weather has been so bad. This whole area in here was flooded if you saw some of my earlier videos from the big storm that we had. And there's a wooden bridge. You can see it very big in the center, in the back there. Well made. I wouldn't worry about them walking across them. They've got some fencing up. And you can bring their dogs out here. You can have pets as long as they're on a leash. Sometimes around the campsites they don't keep their pets on a leash, but the ones that have the ferocious looking dogs are told to keep them on the leash. The little bitty ones sometimes get away with it. Everything's well marked. This is not a trail, but people use it as a cut through. Alcohol is prohibited in public places in most state and federal parks. That's all right. I don't drink at all, so it doesn't matter. I'm coming up on my normal spot, my river view. And you can see the river there at the top. And I think this is enough to put at the end for you. The water's way down. It was up even further than that wet spot when it was flooding. And pretty clear, pretty clean of trash. You should have seen how much trash was in this. You have to go back a couple of videos. I don't remember which ones, but it was amazing. Blessings.